Warm greetings and a hearty welcome to all of you joining us from different parts of the world, from different time zones. I, Cynthia Matthew, along with Janet Palafox, working as IBVM CJ NGO representatives at New York, would like to thank and welcome each of you to this celebration of 20 years of life and mission of Mary Ward Women at the United Nations. A very special welcome to our keynote speaker, Dr. Azza Karam, and the panelists. We have gathered here to acknowledge, honor, and celebrate our presence and other faith-based NGOs and their valuable contribution to the UN in its attempt to build a more just and humane world. Our foundress, Venerable Mary Ward's powerful message, "Be seekers of truth and doers of justice," is the motivating force behind our response to the challenging needs of the time. Our pioneers, following the charism of Mary Ward and the gospel values, responded with great enthusiasm to this challenge. Yes, that response was so important that today we are at this global platform to advocate for the people and the planet. It was in September 2003 that we received an associate status with the Department of Global Communications, and in 2015, a special consultative status with the UN Economic and Social Council. We gratefully remember all those who have worked hard to bring the NGO office to its present status. Another milestone for us was when in October 2017, the Congregation of Jesus joined the office. It is both worthwhile and important to be here as not only relevant, but legitimate actors in the global policy-making process. Our work at the UN is possible only with the support of all of you. We appreciate this support and encouragement very much. Once again, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. Now, I would like to invite Sarah IBVM from Mary Ward Center, Canada, to lead us in a short reflection.
As we begin our prayer this morning, let us place ourselves in the presence of God. We give thanks.
We give thanks
for the gift of this Mary Ward family, called to be people of freedom, justice, sincerity, and joy.
We give thanks.
We give thanks for the 20 years of service of the IBVM CJ NGO to the United Nations.
We give thanks.
We give thanks for the blessing of our faith that inspires us to work for a more just, humane, and sustainable world.
We give thanks to you, O God.
Amen.
Amen.
हे ईश्वर, हम उन सभी सांसारिक चीजों से मुक्त होना चाहते हैं जो हमें भगवान की इच्छा पूरी करने से रोकती हैं। ऐसी उदासीनता हमें ईश्वर, पड़ोसी और पूरी सृष्टि के लिए किसी भी अच्छे कार्य में संलग्न होने से वंचित रखती हैं। हम सभी को ईश्वर की ओर संदर्भित करने की स्वतंत्रता में जीवन पाते हैं, जो सभी प्राणियों का स्रोत, दाता और जीवन का पालन करता है। हम महिलाओं और लड़कियों के लिए विशेष चिंता के साथ सभी लोगों को पूर्ण सम्मान और समान अधिकारों के साथ जीने की आजादी के लिए प्रयास करते हैं। तदनुसार हम मानव अधिकारों की संयुक्त राष्ट्र घोषणा को व्यवहार में लाते हैं।
Dreptate. Încercăm să fim femei transformate de mesajul Evangheliei și de întâlnirea cu Iisus Hristos, care ne readuce la starea de dreptate originară. Ne străduim să fim făcătoare de dreptate, să trăim într-o relație corectă cu Dumnezeu, cu aproapele și cu întreaga creație. Punem în centru vocile femeilor și fetelor. Îi însoțim pe cei marginalizați și le creăm spațiu pentru ca aceștia să se poată autopromoveze.
Somos conscientes de que en nuestro mundo se necesita justicia respecto a equidad de género, eliminación de violencia de género, erradicación de la pobreza, acceso a una educación y salud de calidad, eliminación del tráfico de personas, cuidado del medio ambiente y financiación para el desarrollo.
Sincerity. We seek to be such as we appear and appear such as we are, bringing our authentic selves and the witness of our faith to the mission of global peace and justice at the UN. We strive to be the authentic voice of the Mary Ward family at the UN, through each voice that participates in immersion experiences, internships, network meetings, and commissions. Joy. We seek to be people of joy, trusting in the providence of God. We strive to bring the joy of the gospel and the joy of our charism as we challenge the injustices, the unjust structures, grounded in the vision of the just soul, we gain God's true wisdom and the ability to do all that is asked of us. In gratitude, echoing Mary Ward's words, we pray. Jesus, say Amen.
We live in blessedness. Gracious God, we live in the blessedness of your presence, your love that surrounds and inundates us. Your blessedness permeates, envelops, encompasses us, resides in every aspect of our being, forever gifting each and every moment of our life. We honor and reverence your blessedness, found in the diversity of cultures and religious tradition, and in the incredible beauty of your creation. Loving God, we ask that we may ever see clearly, hear plainly, smell sweetly, touch tenderly, and taste gracefully the gift of blessedness you abundantly bestow on us. Finally, we ask that we may ever grow in the awareness of our blessedness, in the amazement of our interconnectedness with all of creation and with each and every person. Bountiful God, in awe and gratitude, we give thanks for the mystery of presence, of love that utterly enfolds and embraces us, for all the ways we live in blessedness.
In blessedness.
We live in blessedness.
Thank you, Sarah, for that very moving reflection. We are able to carry out our work at the UN because of the cooperation from all of you, as well as the timely support and encouragement received from our leadership teams, both past and present. Due to the other engagements, Sisters Carmel and Veronica could not be part of the panel today. They have very kindly sent us their video message. Let's listen to their message.
As leadership teams of IBVM and CJ, we are pleased to offer our sincere congratulations on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of our presence as NGO at the United Nations in New York.
For 20 years, Mary Ward Sisters have been involved with the United Nations NGO with great commitment. It was a clear, discerned decision by our two congregations to provide a member to represent the interest of the global CJ IBVM family at the United Nations to advocate for the voices of the poorest and most vulnerable in our world. It is a commitment at a level where structural change can be influenced. As partners for policy development and the implementation of such policies, there is much scope for collaboration in addressing the continuous violation of human rights.
Our United Nations NGO representatives have been very active in the last 2 decades, building up a well-functioning office. They have worked closely with the advisory board and the province representatives. They have skillfully animated creative activities and made many valuable resources available to those who work for change. A considerable network has been built up and is still growing.
Thanks to the dedication of our United Nations representatives, a congregation-wide awareness of personal responsibility regarding peace, dignity, equality and protection of our planet has grown. The global Mary Ward family, sisters, friends, associates, companions of Mary Ward, school personnel, parents and students, has been challenged and encouraged by the United Nations Office to promote the struggle for a better world within the framework of their respective contexts and possibilities. We are convinced that the continuous representation at the United Nations, as well as local commitment, will enable transformation at all levels over time.
We express our sincere gratitude to all those who have been missioned to New York up to now. We also appreciate the invaluable contribution of the members of the advisory board. In our provinces and regions, many individuals are committed to much needed transformation thanks to the input, direction and energy of our representatives at the United Nations down through the years.
A Jubilee is an opportunity to give thanks for all the good that has happened, a reason to rejoice and celebrate. But it is also a moment to reflect, to evaluate, to strengthen goals and identify possible further steps for implementation. The gratitude for a successful past will motivate us to shape our future commitment in a spirit of discernment.
May the various events and activities of this Jubilee time heighten awareness and strengthen the support of the entire Mary Ward family for the work of IBVM CJ NGO at the United Nations. Again, congratulations and God's rich blessings for the future.
Thank you, Sisters Carmel and Veronica, for your powerful message, and above all, for your continued support for our mission at the UN. And we acknowledge Sister Veronica for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. This session will be moderated by two of our vibrant youth interns, Mahi Tripathi and Kashvi Agarwal. They have been the voice of the youth, especially advocating for the rights of girls at the UN. Now, it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Azza Karam, a friend and an inspiration, a very humble and committed person. Dr. Azza Karam is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Women's Leading Partnership, a global organization dedicated to transforming power relations and promoting justice, equality, peace, and sustainable development. Prior to joining this organization, Dr. Azza Karam served Religions for Peace as the organization's first woman, North African, and Muslim Secretary General. She is a member of the United Nations Secretary General's high-level advisory board on effective multilateralism and continues to serve academically. There is so much to say about Dr. Azza. Please read her full bio posted in the chat box. Thank you, Azza, for your ever-willing spirit in responding to our request to be the keynote speaker for today. We are indeed very thankful for your presence and inspiration. We are eagerly waiting to hear as you speak from your heart. Over to you, Azza.
Oh, heavens. Thank you very much indeed for this delightful, very, very gracious and kind opportunity. I am humbled by the invitation to address you on such an important occasion. I wish to pay my respect to the Mary Ward family and to on this especially auspicious occasion, 20 years in serving at the UN, with the UN, within the UN, is definitely a significant milestone. And I am very honored and privileged to have this moment to, for lack of a better word, converse with you on some of the issues related to being faith-based, faith-inspired, and serving at the United Nations as this incredible IBVM CJ NGO does. So thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to be able to think aloud with you. I have worked on the intersection of religion, religious institutions, religious NGOs, religious leaders, and human rights and good governance for almost 40 years now, as a student, as a teacher, and as an activist. I am going to share some very, shall we say, thought-provoking thoughts with you, not because I aim to provoke per se, but also because I think we're at the things that are happening around us in the world now demand that we are perhaps even more courageous and even more self-reflexive than all of us have been for a long time. And I think it's important to, as we come together in this space, in the different spaces of encounter, it is important for us to enable and allow one another that space to be somewhat constructively critical as we acknowledge the remarkable input and contributions that faith-based and faith-inspired people of peace like yourselves and the entire Mary Ward family and so many non-governmental organizations who work with the UN are. If ever there was a moment in our history in which we are called upon to come together in determined thoughts and actions for peace and about peace, it is this moment now.
Este es el momento.
One of the things that I'm hearing my own translation in Spanish, which is really interesting, but just letting you know. One of the things that I want to share with you now is just something that you know already, but so as we can set the parameters for the due recognition and celebration that the Mary Ward family and other inspired, faith-inspired organizations need to always find and receive, that due recognition and celebration of tireless and remarkable efforts and continuing commitments to peace. Because I have worked with secular non-governmental organizations and other secular intergovernmental settings and networks, as well as with faith-based and faith-inspired, I'm going to share 3 distinctive features of faith-based and faith-inspired activism in issues of peacemaking, which includes upholding human rights and sustainable development efforts. As you well know, the sustainable development efforts are everything practically that is needed and gets done, whether it's on poverty, employment, environment, gender equality, everything that lives around us that is related to human development. So what are the 3 distinctive features about faith-based, faith-inspired, and, for lack of a better word, secular, more secular values, which, by the way, all values are derived from faiths. So, but let's, for the sake of our incredibly westernized secular hemisphere, think that secular is somehow a different set of values. But what are some of the distinctive features about those who maintain and uphold the faith-based identity as they undertake incredibly valuable work in international development, human rights, and peace and security? One particular distinction is that as these faith-based and faith-inspired actors serve, they actually refer to their work as service, as opposed to I'm working in, but most faith-based and faith-inspired actors refer to what they do as a service, most especially women, faith-based and faith-inspired like yourselves. What you may notice is that as you speak of your work, as you relate it and relate to it, you will be talking of service, and you won't shy away of talking about service. It will be somewhat rarer to find the more secular inspired actors speaking about their service. Another interesting and distinctive feature is that faith-based and faith-inspired activism in general has tended to be, I'm using those verbs deliberately, volunteer and voluntary. There are very few, of course there are some, but on the spectrum of the whole of the faith-based and faith-inspired actions, there are very few that are actually based on getting paid and paid significant amounts of money. Whereas if you take a peek at the relatively more secular spaces, the aspect of monetary value and recognition of work done is much more significant. In other words, there will be a tendency, and again, there will be a tendency, there has been a tendency in the faith-based and faith-inspired world to serve voluntarily, to give of one's time and effort and thoughts and whatever resources on a volunteer basis. And this is a very distinctive aspect, or has been a very distinctive aspect of faith-based service. The third, by the way, there are many, but I'm just choosing 3 prominent ones because I want to talk about how those then look and what they mean today. The third aspect of faith-based and faith-inspired service is that, quite frankly, it is truly universal, transnational. It knows no boundaries. It understands and recognizes, all of you understand and recognize different countries, geographies, races, genders. You get all that. You do all that. but you rarely ever confine yourself to only one geographical location of service, and you rarely ever confine yourself to only one area or aspect of human rights, peace and security and development. So actually, faith-based and faith-inspired activism and service tends to be multilateral in the sense that you work together for everything. And when you address any particular issue, you address and you serve with an understanding of the complexity of the whole. So even if you're doing and specializing, shall we say, in the domain of environment, that specialization in the domain of environment is not to the exclusion of issues of race and class and gender and poverty. On the contrary, it is a rather holistic understanding of what it is that needs to happen. And you approach it with that, how can we serve the whole of the set of issues, rather than how can we zero in on biodiversity and work on that alone, for instance. This compound or holistic approach to serving different domains is a very unique feature of faith-based and faith-inspired activism. I'll wager that this comes because the inspiration that is from faith rarely tends to be, well, I'm inspired by my faith to serve the environment at the exclusion of all else, because actually our faiths tell us that everything is interconnected because the same creator created all. So you can't just serve in one little part of things, no matter how grand that is, but actually it is in that holistic approach that the service is done. So a holistic approach, a usually tendency towards serving voluntarily, and an ability to look at the different intersections of issues together without necessarily focusing on only one. I think those are at least some of the distinctive qualities. There are many others. Why did I choose those specific three qualities? Because they impact a great deal on the way that our world is today. We live in a world in which, by and large, it seems as if we have lost touch with the essential values that we need as human beings, whether they are enshrined in a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or whether they are derived from a holy book or a sacred narrative. There seems to be a significant distance from values and actions. Every faith tradition in the world, and I use that term deliberately, faith tradition, not just religion, every faith tradition in the world actually says pretty much the same thing about how interconnected our very existence is. It also, most faith traditions, if not all of them, tell us that we have to live in service to one another and to our environment. All faith traditions from the indigenous on instruct that awareness, that consciousness, if you will, of interdependency, and therefore the need to be deliberate in serving one another. But our contemporary norms and behaviors, from governments to non-state actors of remarkably diverse hue, are actually pointing to another standard entirely, which is more winner takes all, more weapons, more power, bigger is better, force and violence get things done. This is the era of force and violence, whereas all faith traditions actually preach cohesion, peacefulness, mindfulness, service. So we are living at a time of remarkably conflicting realities, the realities of the faith-based and faith-inspired, and the realities of how most seem to be operating today, which is winner takes all and might is right. Given this dynamic, the ethos of service holistic, without regard for remuneration, is an incredibly precious set of realities. So you're celebrating 20 years at the UN, which is a significant milestone. And perhaps I would dare to say it hasn't been more important than it is right now. So 20 years after the service at the UN, with policymakers attempting to influence spaces, now is the time when you are needed most. The question is how to continue to serve in this space of the United Nations in a way that can enable you to do your fundamental mission of healing. Yours is a fundamental mission of healing. Spirit, soul, body, and environment. How to continue to serve in this context where might is right and values are valueless. You yourselves, based on your extensive experiences, know best how to serve your communities, how to do the work you've done and will continue to do best. So I am not supposing that I will be able to tell you anything you do not know. There is only one thing that I would like to advocate for that I think truly will make a difference given the current situation in our world. Of this might makes right, even at the expense of our long-term livelihoods and sustainability, let alone peace. Two things I would like to suggest are incredibly necessary and important. Again, based not on the fact that you already don't do a very fine job, you do a very, very fine job. Statistics, such as they are, tell us that even in the domain of primary healthcare, let alone education, sanitation, environment, peace building, let alone in all the, but just if we take the example of public health, which coming out of a pandemic is really not a bad example to see. But if we just take the example of public health, we know that faith-based organizations serve to the tune of at least 30 to 40% basic primary healthcare all over the world. The average rate of service that is faith-based and faith-inspired everywhere in the world is, say, 30%, which means that everywhere in the world, a quarter of public health services are actually run by and through religious organizations or religious institutions. That's a massive amount of service on the very basic levels of human existence, and the very basic levels of human needs, health. We don't have the data that tell us what that rate of service is when it comes to nutrition, education, and sanitation. An example I always share is that, I'm a Muslim, an Egyptian. When I went to school in Egypt, I went to school to a Catholic school. And like many around the world who come from different religious backgrounds, actually got schooled in Catholic schools. Why? Because they were and still are known to be amongst the best. So this is just a reality. They're there, they're present, and they're amongst the best. That is a global reality. What it tells us in terms of percentages of educational institutions that serve in the education sector, we don't have all the data about that yet. But I can tell you that it's awesomely clear to most people around the world that religious institutions were the original schools and education centers and libraries and spaces and centers of knowledge in most parts of the world, and they still are. So the truth is that when it comes to public service, when it comes to the work of development, actually religious institutions are at the forefront of serving communities. So I am not about to tell you how to do that. What I am going to challenge a little bit is the extent to which those service institutions, service mechanisms, those organizations like yours actually work collectively, actually serve together. In other words, how much of what areas of service that you excel in and deliver are actually done by other religious organizations, other religious institutions, not only from within your own faith, but actually multi-religiously. How many of these critical services that are being run in different countries around the world, how many of them are actually done together? So that it's not only the Christian, which heaven knows is big enough, it's not only the ecumenical, but it's actually the ecumenical plus the other religions. One of the findings from the COVID pandemic was that very few of these religious institutions and religious services were being coordinated with one another, not just ecumenically, but you would find in the same country where everybody was suffering the same issues and the same concerns, the same fears, the same diseases, the same symptoms, that every single faith-inspired service was being delivered in a silo. The Catholic communities and organizations were serving everyone, but they were serving as the Catholic community and organizations. The Muslim communities and organizations serving everyone, but serving as Muslim alone. Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, all serving all, but each serving on their own. The trick to balance a world that is inspired by might rather than by what is just, the trick to changing that balance is not only to continue to serve as we always have, but the trick is to build the bridges with one another based precisely on our beliefs and our abilities to serve all. We're halfway there. We're halfway there because every single one of these different faith-based and faith-inspired domains is actually serving everyone, right? So whether they're Catholic or Protestant of different hues, or Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist or Sikh or what have you, they're all serving everyone. These services don't say, okay, if you're not of my religion, you can't come in, or I'm not going to serve you. On the contrary, they serve all. So we're halfway there. The other half, though, that is the tipping point for what we are called upon to do by our faiths. The other half that is the tipping point is to be able to serve together, to serve all, to do so together. And that's the only thing that will distinguish from otherwise run public health services, public schooling, public education, public whatever. The only thing that will distinguish and create a tipping point towards a genuine ability to coexist in spite of the challenges is that we can work and deliver together. Now, why is that so difficult? It's difficult for a number of reasons. It's hard to coordinate when you have so many different institutions and organizations anyway in one place. It's one of the most difficult things to do. But you know something? It's even harder to let things be and go as they are today. Because look at the result. Look at the result around us when you're serving selflessly for decades, for centuries. And look at the state of the world around us. Clearly, serving selflessly on our own isn't enough. The question is, how do we serve together better? Now imagine the scenarios that many of you probably know in your own individual lives, or perhaps in your organizational lives, where you have managed to come together across different religious belief systems and serve the same communities. Those of you who have those experiences know how incredibly empowering that is, not only in terms of being able to serve better and to serve more, but actually for your own sense of faithfulness. What is more amazing than being able to pray together, irrespective of what it is we're praying for and how it is that we're praying? What is more empowering on the route to encounter the divine than to be able to do so across our different faith traditions? Yet all of us acknowledge and bow to the divine. If we believe that we are all created from that same creator, then why do we think that it's only our way that acknowledges the truth of that creator? If indeed we are all created by the same creator, then it is incumbent upon us to collectively serve that creator. And perhaps it is in that collective service that we encounter the true face of our creator. Now, how does this work in a secular context? So the good news is that the awareness of faith-based and faith-inspired engagement, action, and services is now perhaps at an all-time high within these secular institutions. There are many who will still complain, quite rightly, that the average secular decision maker in a government or an intergovernmental setting like the United Nations or the European Union or the African Union or many such, there are those who will legitimately say they still don't see the value added of faith-inspired engagement. And that is true. There are still many who think that religion is a source of all trouble. And really, I really have no time for this. We've got to get our relatively more secular actors, institutions, and services running better. That faith-based can do whatever they want. They do it, in their own spaces, in their own time. That's all good. But really, we've got our own set of doing things, and that's a very secular modus operandi, and that's what we're interested in. Yes, there are still many who think that. The truth, however, is that over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years within the United Nations system itself, there is a greater awareness. There are many more partnerships being forged in country and at the regional level and at the global level with religious organizations and NGOs. Many more heads of religious NGOs are being invited to secular policy-making tables in intergovernmental fora by governments, etc. And that's just a reality. There are two challenges with that. And that's where the not so good news comes in. 99% of those who are convened around the policy table, when they are convened, when they are invited, when they're partnered with, are generally male-dominated institutions, and usually they're men sitting around the table. Now, faith-inspired and faith-based men are absolutely wonderful, no issue there. But the truth of the matter is that it's usually women who are doing a bulk of the service delivery, coordination, and organization in their respective communities. And their perspectives, their realities, their truths rarely ever make it to the policymaking table. That is being worked on by some of these organizations like yours, who are there as women-led, women-driven, women-run. But you'll find that the access and entry points still remain limited to male religious leaders and male-run entities and organizations. And there is an ever so subtle, shall we say, tendency to prefer the male-run establishments and the male leaders. Because you see, we talk a lot about how the secular values have unfolded and what they are. And the truth is that this reality that we live in, where effectively might makes right, that is not a women-led or a women-driven or a women-inspired reality. That is a misogynistic reality. Secular, faith-based, and everything in between, women suffer that reality. And they are at a disadvantage in such a context in general. You would think that given this rising misogyny, women would come together more across their faith traditions, and even with no faith traditions, that they would simply coalesce more to serve more, to serve better, to heal more. Unfortunately, we do not see those kinds of partnerships between faith-based and faith-inspired women and their secular counterparts committed to almost the same things, by the way. Instead, we see deep divisions forming on specific issues. And while these specific faith-driven issues are important and very significant for believers, it is important even more, I think, to remember that the ultimate objective of peaceful and social coexistence demands that we learn how to overcome our differences on specific issues and to nevertheless work together to serve the common good. Very often, multilateral spaces, in other words, spaces like the United Nations, where more than one partner there's more than one actor, very often multilateral spaces will not see the multi-religious spaces. They will assume that multilateral means secular, when in fact, multilateral also means multi-religious. But why would you expect a secular policymaker, or a whole bunch of them for that matter, to believe that multi-religious is multilateral? Why would you expect them to believe that when the multi-religious is really not that obvious? Where is the multi-religious set of partnerships and collaborations around the world that are contributing to the very basic needs of humanity? Where are they? The answer is they're not really very existent. Quite frankly, if they were, we wouldn't be in the situation that we are in today in terms of war being seen as the most likely and most necessary option by most decision makers in most countries around the world. If we worked multi-religiously, we would be better inspired to serve all together. If we worked multi-religiously, war would never be an option. War is an option only of those who work in their own domains with their own belief systems, whether those belief systems are religious or faith or secular. War is not an option that those inspired by their faiths working together would ever choose for. And war is not an option for the women who are serving selflessly, tirelessly on a volunteer basis, all their communities together. It is not an option women would make or take. Yes, women do get involved in secular policy-making stages, and they do make war. There is a legacy and history of that too. We're not saying women are angels. What I am saying is that women inspired by their faith, working together across their faiths in serving their communities, are 99.9% unlikely to ever wage war against each other. And that's a truth because there's not a single example in history which we can use to counter that. When and if multi-religious collaboration and service towards communities happens, especially when it happens with women and by women, that's when we will not have any war anywhere anymore. Right now, we're talking about secular misogynistic attitudes which make use of religion and religious values, specific religious values, never multi-religious values. But what dominates today is a misogyny that sometimes makes use of religion, specific religions, for its own purposes. And look at the result around us. To be committed to one's faith tradition demands that we are committed to each other irrespective of our faith traditions. And that's the space that we need to arrive at together. And that's the lesson learned from looking at over 75 years of international engagement within the United Nations system and of secular engagement around the world, and hundreds of years of multi-religious existence, but not multi-religious collaboration towards peace. That's the bridge we have to cross together, working together across our faith traditions, inspired by our common humanity and the fact that actually what will be good for you will be good for me, but your annihilation is mine. Therefore, we have a vested interest in working together. What we need is not to see where we differ so much in our faith traditions. What we need is to understand that we're all created by the same. And therefore, whatever you believe, we will work to serve one another. That the other is but part of ourselves, but never another. And the secular policy-making tradition of the last 75 years has taught us that that doesn't work. What we have to do is different. It has to be inspired by our faiths, to serve our faiths collectively. And perhaps it is now time for the women of faith, like yourselves, to continue to steward that kind of collaboration across faiths on all issues of common good around the world. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Azza, for that strong and inspiring speech, highlighting the importance of faith-based and inspired activism for a holistic and intersectional approach towards global problems. Your words and the call for multi-religious development involving and led by women have moved many today, and we're honored to have you with us. Our first panel discussion today will feature IBVM CJ UNNGO representatives as they share their invaluable and experiences in advocating for change on this platform. Sister Patricia Murray, a pivotal figure in establishing our presence at the UN, will enlighten us on the reasons behind this crucial decision of the Institute leadership to have a representative advocating at the UN. In this engaging discussion, our keynote speaker and panelists will delve into the vital role of faith-based organizations on the international stage. Furthermore, they will address questions from our audience, providing a comprehensive understanding of the impactful work carried out by these representatives. A warm welcome to all our esteemed panelists and guests. The speakers' extensive bios will be shared in the chat box as and when we introduce them. Let us now begin. We are truly honored to have with us today our first panelist, a distinguished and dedicated individual whose lifelong commitment to justice, peace, and education has left an indelible mark. It is a privilege to welcome and introduce Sister Patricia Murray, IBVM. Unfortunately, Sister Pat is unable to join us in person. She has been appointed by Pope Francis to be part of the synthesis committee of the Synod currently happening in Rome. Sister Pat, however, has sent us a video which we will now play.
Greetings to everyone present. I'm very happy to join you from Rome, and unfortunately I can't be with you in person because I'm attending the Synod. I'm very happy to share with you the beginnings of the UN NGO office in New York. In the early 2000s, religious congregations here in Rome began to reflect together on how more religious could be present at the United Nations in New York, bringing the voices of those who had no voice to the center of the deliberations of the United Nations. And so about 56 religious women and men traveled to the United Nations to experience life there and also to meet with representatives of congregations who were already present at the United Nations. It was a very interesting and stimulating visit. When we returned back to Rome, we began to reflect with our various general councils on the next steps. The IBVM General Council decided to partner with the religious of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, but that both of us would apply for separate status at the United Nations. And so our journey began. As part of making an application, we had to assemble material from every province worldwide, details about our mission there and the various ministries, because we had to demonstrate to the United Nations that we had the capacity to make its work known and also to partner with the UN in various parts of the world. So having presented a very large dossier to the United Nations, I was then interviewed by their representative here in Rome. It was a very detailed interview, and the woman interviewing me was from Peru, and so she asked me, "Where are you in Peru?" So when I said to her that we had a school in Jicamarca She stopped me immediately and said, if you are meeting the needs of the people in Hikamarka, then I can approve your application for membership at the Department of Public Information at the United Nations. And so our story at the UN began in that way. So I'm very grateful for all those who followed, who were present over many years at the United Nations, who spread knowledge of its work, but also who have participated with many congregations and now participating with the Congregation of Jesus to make the voice of those who are voiceless heard and to highlight various issues that otherwise would not be attended to at the United Nations. I wish everybody a very happy anniversary and look forward to participating in many initiatives into the future. Thank you very much and God bless. Greetings.
A very big thank you to Sister Pat for her words of wisdom, highlighting the importance of the presence of faith-based organizations at the UN. We are privileged to have in our midst an exceptional individual whose life's work and dedication to various causes have made a profound impact. Sister Yvonne Hunter. Sister, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Dr. Azza Karam, for articulating so forcefully and so clearly what I wish I had said, but which I will attempt to say in my own way, but less articulate and less forceful. In 2000, Kofi Annan, then Secretary General of the United Nations, issued a statement that to me made it clear that as a religious congregation, a civil society organization, IBVM should be present at the UN. Kofi Annan said, if the UN's global agenda is to be properly addressed, partnership with civil society is not an option, it is a necessity. At about the same time, a UN spokesperson said this, it is important for faith-based groups to be at the UN because you are international and have vast networks. You are in hard places and have been there for a long time. You do a lot with a little, and you come to the table with interests that are not your own. When I arrived in New York in 2003, there were about 25 religious congregations with full-time representatives at the UN. We met monthly as a run, Religious at the UN, for mutual support, for information sharing, and for collaboration. I also had opportunities to work with other faith-based groups, especially Caritas Internationalis, the Temple of Understanding, Baha'i, the Salvation Army, and the Global Partnership for Education. With them, as with the religious congregations, I worked on NGO committees preparing responses to statements from UN official commissions and drafting recommendations based on our constituents' grassroots experience. At that time, our UN status was with the Department of Public Information, so we could not make submissions on our own. We could, however, sign our organization's name to submissions from NGOs with ECOSOC status, which we now have thanks to Sister Cecilia. I was able to rely on representatives of other UN groups to assist with offering workshops to both adult and student groups visiting the UN. I could do the same for them. Even after I returned to Toronto, I was still able to ask former colleagues to assist with presentations to groups from Toronto schools who visited right up until COVID. A very significant learning experience for me was working on the creation of an NGO committee on financing for development. This was a newly established department at the UN. Its director, Oscar de Rojas, was delighted to work closely with us because the financing for development was an understaffed and underfinanced department. He said to us, "I need all the help I can get." His assistance enabled us to maneuver through the incredible bureaucracy of establishing an officially recognized UN NGO committee on financing for development in record time. On another level, IBVM collaborated on so-called side events during UN commissions and at the annual NGO DPI conferences. We had Cyril Mooney on education, Mary Owens on HIV/AIDS, Efigenia Gachiri on female genital mutilation, and Cryptes El Salvador on sustainable agriculture. They were presenters or members of panels, along with representatives of other religious congregations and lay groups at DPI conferences in New York, Australia, and Bonn, Germany. As time went on, we as religious NGOs realized more and more the importance of partnerships and collaboration. It is surely true that we can do far more together than we can do alone. And that was certainly true of my experience during the 3 years I spent in New York. Before I close, I cannot omit mentioning the fact that the IBVM and the Religious of the Sacred Heart, as Pat Murray indicated, began at the UN together as partners, and I lived and had office space and hospitality in their home in New York. I also want to say that incredible support from general leadership, especially Pat Murray, made a challenging time easier. Pope Francis, in section 4 of Laudate Deum, addresses what he calls the weakness of international politics. And he calls for a multilateralism in which ethics will prevail over local or contingent interests. Is this not the founding principle and purpose of the UN? In my opinion, IBVM CJ and other faith-based NGOs must be there to keep pushing the UN to be true to itself and to make our common home a fit place for all people to live in peace and security with dignity. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing this inspiring speech highlighting the importance of NGOs, faith-based groups, and partnerships at the UN to promote ethics and global cooperation. We are delighted to now introduce a remarkable individual, Sister Anne Kelly, a dedicated advocate for education and social justice. Sister, you have the floor. Sister Anne is not able to join us due to the time difference and has asked Janet to read her reflections on her behalf.
Thank you, Kashvi. As time zone differences have made it difficult for Anne to join us, she has asked me to speak on her behalf. And I read her text. I was the IBVM representative at the UN from May 2010 until June 2013, and therefore had the good fortune to follow in the footsteps of Yvonne, Hunter, and Doreen Kirby. Both women forged strong relationships with their counterparts from other NGOs, including faith-based ones, which proved invaluable. In terms of global tensions, this is relatively hopeful time to be at the UN. As members of civil society, we were treated with respect and included in key events and commissions. We were also encouraged to invite speakers to what are called side events to highlight the issues of concern to us. As human trafficking was and still is a key focus of our advocacy, I invited Anna Stakash, an Albanian colleague of Imelda Pool, to take part in the Commission on the Status of Women. Her first-hand testimony about this particular form of exploitation was far more powerful than any document or written resolution could have been. Part of my work involved visiting the UN embassies of countries where our sisters live and work. To my great surprise, many of these highly educated people had little or no knowledge about human trafficking and even less about the scourge of FGM. Because I had worked for 6 years in northern Uganda and Timor-Leste before taking on the UN role, I had particular interest in girls' education and found it heartening that so many of my colleagues shared the same passion, in particular in the Working Group on Girls. What numerous reports and research findings were making clear at this time was the link between women's education and the economic and social empowerment of her community. For example, the longer a girl can remain at school, the more likely her own daughters will be educated, and the more likely she will be able to earn an income, however meager. A fact that is obvious to us now, but was only just emerging then. I also had the good fortune to be in New York when the decision to proclaim the International Day of the Girl was made. At a gathering of NGOs and girl advocates in 2012, I asked one of the girls why they had chosen 11 October as the date, a date referred to in the US as 10/11. And she explained that for millions of girls, things start to go seriously wrong once they hit puberty at 10, 11, or 12. And finally, a major highlight of my final year in New York was the decision to draft the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, a hope-filled initiative that absorbed the energy and attention of my very capable successor, Cecilia Dwyer, to whom I will hand over now. Thank you.
Thank you to Sister Anne for her enlightening speech, which underscores the impact of work at the UN in advocating for important issues like human trafficking, girls' education, and sustainable development goals. Her dedication and contributions are truly commendable. We also keep in remembrance Sister Doreen, who was the UN representative before Sister Anne. Now, introducing Sister Cecilia, a devoted member of the IBVM Loreto in Spain, who served a pivotal role as the IBVM representative to the United Nations. Sister, we invite you to share your insights with us now.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I'm delighted to be here today. Azza, I just want to tell you that you have been a powerful inspiration for the faith-based groups at the United Nations. I can tell you that because I was there and I witnessed what you were doing. And I'm just so aware of what you are saying about this need for us from our different religious backgrounds to actually work together. And I think we need to do that not only at the UN, which I think we try to do, but also at the local level, you know. So I think what you're saying now, that with time, and I suppose the sooner the better, you know, that we do this at all levels, I think it will be better for our world today. Ivan, Pat, Ivan, and then Doreen, Marilla, and Anne, as representatives and as basic founder or part of the founding group, shall we call it, of the NGO, I think we have been part of a meaningful endeavor on behalf of the Institute and now our congregations. And it was an initiative that was different, new for all of us. It was a global ministry that brought with it the need to think globally and connect local actions with global endeavor. Now, this is very important 20 years later, and I think we're seeing the need for this all around us today. So I am grateful for what you went before me did, the structures you set up, the networks and the processes that I just continued and was delighted to continue and develop further. My time as NGO representative, it was challenging, but it was enjoyable and fulfilling. Not only in that it involved, the work at the United Nations itself in New York, but then, as somebody else mentioned earlier on, it was getting us involved in other United Nations bases around the world. For example, in Geneva, in Vienna, and the human trafficking, the environment in Nairobi, the sustainable development goals at the regional offices, in Chile, and the UN conferences in Korea and places like Salt Lake City. It was, I think, a beautiful kind of engagement with the UN all over the world. And it was a very fulfilling experience for me, and I think for others who were involved as well. I think my work as a faith-based NGO, and specifically as representative of a religious congregation, I tried to promote the values and principles that inspire our actions and what we advocate at the United Nations. Now, I did not preach about it, but it was there in the background all the time. And I can say the same for all the other faith-based NGOs, not only the Catholics, the other Christian churches, the other religions. We were all together, and there was something, I think, that the golden rule, that do unto others what you would want them to do to you. I think that was basic for all of us. And in our own ways, we were working along that. Now, how did we work to create awareness and impact? I think seeing it back then, and the world has changed a lot recently, so I don't know if it would be the same now. But anyway, the creating awareness, because it was necessary to create awareness, even among the diplomats, about the aspects of our work that were important for us, because they did not necessarily know the kind of experience that we had on the ground, right? So, and they represent their national governments. So we worked on specific points to move forward the discussions in a way that was acceptable to us, myself and all of those of us who were parts of the faith-based organizations. And then, of course, nobody works together by themselves. Sorry, we work as in NGO committees usually, or the greatest part of the time. And then as members of these committees, we were in contact the whole time with diplomats from the member states, and the UN staff were always there and a great support the whole time, I must say that. And giving us space, I think the UN staff, they were excellent at that. So anyway, from my perspective, then to try to get along with the part of the work in New York, you had to be knowledgeable. We had to be knowledgeable about what we were trying to propose to the members of the other member states there. We're to be open-minded, ready to collaborate with like-minded people and with those who are different. And it involved a lot of personal study, many meetings, follow-up to meetings, and conversations with representatives of these different states to discuss our concerns, and very often to organize events together that would have a more widespread contact. Now, and this is quite recent, and things have changed since then, I think, a lot. But we could work very well with specific member states just to bring our concerns, because they were aligned with those of those states, right? So basically, awareness raising, putting forward our position and the persuasion, and then trying to get our content for our concerns, to get that into the discourse and the documents. That was important. And when I say we, I'm just going to say who was we when we were there in New York. So I'm just going to show you a few photos. Janet, could you allow me to share the screen? Is that okay? I'm afraid I can't share the screen. Well, that's too bad. I had some photos there of the people, of those of us who were in New York, you know. And then first of all, there was, well, I was there for a certain number of years, and then Cynthia came along. And we all know the importance of that, of Cynthia being the CJ representative at the UN along with me. And we had some wonderful years together. Then we had, as well as that, we had members who came on immersion experiences. Now, this was important because it was a huge support for us there in New York, because they helped out both in advocacy and in awareness raising above all. And some of you who are on this call today were there as members of the for immersion experiences.
Cecilia, try again. Sorry, I think we've enabled the share. Sorry.
Oh, good.
Is it working? Yes.
I had it. Yes, there it is. Good. There, yeah. Just to show you this, so that you have a few beautiful photos of us. What now? Come on, there. Yeah, there we are. So just go back. Yeah. So that was the big. Yeah, that's us to begin with. You know, Cecilia and Cynthia, and you all know about the two of us, right? So then I'll just go on to, this was our office. We had the privilege of sharing our office in New York with the Daughters of Charity. And it was beautiful the way we worked together. And here you have you have Catherine and Margaret has passed away since I left New York. But that, I'll never forget the way we worked together. These two, it was a good partnership there. Now, let's come now to our immersion experiences and just take a look there. You will recognize the people there, most of you. And my successor, Janet, I think you were the last for the immersion experience. And there, a special thought for Mary Burkhardt, who has passed away since then. And it was beautiful having that experience of the immersion experience there. And then here we have the interns. Interns and youth representatives. And like this little group up at the top, they were there for about 8 months, each one of them. They did magnificent work from the perspective of youth. And it was at a time when at the UN, they were saying, you know, youth has to be involved. We have to hear the voice of youth, right? So they did wonderful work. And then we have young interns here who would come maybe for 2 or 3 months. And they also contributed in an excellent way. So there, and then that's just one of the youth groups there. They organized side events and all of that, because this was important for the awareness creating among the larger public there. So I'll just stop that for the minute. Then apart from that, I just want to talk a bit about our larger network, you know, because one of the, I suppose, what would have seemed a challenge for the larger network is this link of linking the local with the global. Now, I hear people saying more and more today, because it was not only us, it's the UN and members of the UN themselves, they keep saying, you know, we have to get the local people on board and to help them to make the connections. I hear other groups saying it as well, even national governments and even local governments, always talking about the involvement of everyone. And it's the kind of awareness raising for everyone. So I think that was important for us. And it was a kind of a huge part of the work that we needed to do. And it involved a whole lot, like how, what kind of engagement do we try to get? How do we try to get from the link between what we're doing in New York? Then you've got all this middle ground, the different, beginning with the advisory committee, then all those other, province representatives, the networks and all of that, trying to kind of see how we can just build up this common knowledge among all of us. And then as well as that, you have the part of the communication, which I think you've heard a lot about, because we did a lot on communication over the years. And just recently, I was looking at our YouTube channel, and there are hundreds of videos all about our work in New York. And I think it's just interesting to keep that in mind, that all tried to help to build us up to see to see how we all belong to this one large family on the ground and in New York. And I'm just now going to go to our participation with other NGOs, because as I said before, this, as I said before, this is, this is a kind of an important part of the whole thing, because naturally, you don't work by yourself. We worked with other NGOs. Now, we worked with interreligious groups, the Religious NGO Committee, and I think maybe Ivan has mentioned that already. Then, while I was there, the Catholic religious community set up our own a group to kind of help us called JCOR, and that is flourishing now, and it's wonderful to see it. So just here you have a couple of photos that I just wanted to show you of groups of us that work together, you know, and here's another group, and there you see Azza in there in that group as well. And then this is from the interreligious point of view. We would get together, all our different religious faith-based groups, and work together. And then this is another group. It's of the Catholic NGOs did wonderful work together. So I'm just going to finish off now with just a final, just to remember those who have been the Secretary Generals, Ban Ki-moon, and then Antonio Guterres. I think a very brave person at the moment, trying to create space, where such huge differences may come together. And here we have the Pope Francis, who visited the United Nations, and part of what he did has been important, I think, in the work of the United Nations, especially the Laudato Si encyclical. And I just want to finish with, you know, the leadership team that was during my time, most of my time, they came to visit us, and then they also supported in many different ways. So with that, just, I think, it's basically thank you, and especially a thank you to Janet and Cynthia, who have just continued and really developed the work since I left. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sister, for your thoughtful reflection on the impactful work of your time as an NGO representative of the United Nations. Your dedication to promoting global values and principles, collaboration and engagement with various stakeholders, including interns and young people, is commendable. We're extremely grateful to all the speakers for sharing their insights today. We will have an interactive session with all our panelists at the end of the second panel.
We now move on to the second panel. In our second panel discussion, we are honored to have dedicated individuals who have actively contributed to the IBVM CJ UN office, participating in UN processes and events virtually. They will offer insights into their experiences, shedding light on the virtual dimension of their engagement. Arya Jha, our Mary Ward youth advocate, will share her remarkable journey of connecting with youth advocates globally. Join us as we explore the dynamic virtual realm of advocacy and engagement. A warm welcome to our esteemed panelists.
We are delighted to introduce our first speaker for this panel, Sister Priska Vadekipundikulam CJ from Kerala, India, who has a remarkable journey of service and leadership with the Congregation of Jesus, Patna province.
Hello, everyone. Hello from the Provincial House in Patna. I am very happy and feel privileged to be a part of this celebration. 20 years of any worthwhile venture deserves a suitable celebration. The symbolism of number 20, according to numerologists, gives a message to spend some quiet moments contemplating the dual aspects of life, its successes and failures, and how they interplay in our personal journey. In the language of Johanna Augusta, the founder of ministryofnumerology.com, number 20 is a gentle reminder of the beauty and power in partnerships, the serenity of balance, and the patience required in our cosmic journey. And this is precisely what we celebrate today. My experience with IBVM CJ UNNGO is very limited, to a time frame of just 7 years only. The CJ General Council, which was elected in 2011, of which I was a member, took the mandate of CJGC 2011 very seriously. One of the practical steps which we were mandated to implement in order to grow in collaboration between the two branches of Mary Ward's Institute was to work with the IBVM UNNGO. As a result, we made a search to find a person suitable for this mission. Cynthia, our only trained lawyer in the province, was called on for this mission. Thanks to the collaboration and mutual agreement between Noel and Jane, the then general superiors, which made it possible for this great partnership. Thanks also to the then province leader of the Patna province for releasing her in 2017. And also thanks to her successor for letting her continue in this mission till December 2023. For Mary Ward women, using advocacy as a means to bring justice to the weak and vulnerable at all levels is an imperative. One of the concrete expressions of Mary Ward's belief that women in time to come will do much points to the Ministry of Advocacy at all levels. At a global level, the most significant forum for doing this, I believe, is the United Nations. There are many concrete examples of our school networks empowering our students to speak up for the rights of girls and women. What is envisaged by advocacy on the UN level is to work for global systemic change that is sustainable, inclusive, and just, and simultaneously also to raise awareness of the importance of grassroots work to ensure the voices of the most marginalized to get included in our advocacy work. I like to express my gratitude, great gratitude indeed, to all of our lovely IBVM sisters, Judy, Claire, and Barb of the Chicago province, who worked very hard to get all the documents ready so that Cynthia would come to New York in 2017 and take up her role as UN representative. Our gratitude as CJ above all goes to Cecilia O'Dwyer, who accompanied her till she could find her feet in this new place, New York, and to get her head around all that needed to be done for this collaborative effort to work for a more just and humane world, an integral part of Mary Ward's charism. All the programs that they offered on the digital platform were marked by inclusivity, respect for persons, and language groups. For example, prayer together online at various occasions involving different nationalities, cultures, and generations, presentations on themes relevant for our times, not only respected our differences, but celebrated our differences in great appreciation and sensitivity. Getting representatives from different CJ and IBVM provinces and regions to network and to report the happenings in their respective areas was difficult, but they rose to the challenge. This definitely enabled the two in New York, first Cecilia and Cynthia, and then Cynthia and Janet, to get connected to the people at the grassroots, involving them and getting maximum information from them so that they were able to reach the burning local issues to the UN and enabled them to challenge some of the unjust and inhumane structures and events so that concrete actions could be taken on behalf of the victims. On a practical note, some of us proved rather digitally challenged in the initial stages, but the patience and the encouragement of the team made us confident and comfortable. Most importantly, thank you, Pat, for your pioneering work, and thank you to all those who continued this work. A special note of gratitude to all the leadership teams who have been a part of the 20 years of blessings. As we, Mary Ward women, navigate life's pathways, let the harmonious energies of angel number 20 guide us towards unity, balance, and grace until we traverse another numerical path 5 years from now on the silver jubilee of this UN NGO partnership in 2028, when we Mary Ward women will be one both in being and doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing these reflections on the 20th anniversary of the IBVM CJ UN NGO partnership. Your words beautifully convey the importance of collaboration, advocacy, and the pursuit of justice, following in the spirit of Mary Ward's vision. We now introduce Sister Deepti CJ, an accomplished educationist and advocate for social change in Delhi, India, a prominent figure in promoting education, gender equality, and children's welfare. Sister, you have the floor.
Estoy al mismo tiempo tomando parte en el...
Greetings to all. I am Sister Deepti CJ, JPIC UN representative of Delhi province, India. Being a UN representative in my province, I came to know that advocacy is important to protect the rights of the people who may otherwise be ignored. Our main thrust has always been on education, as education plays a key role in building sustainable and resilient societies and help in achieving sustainable development goals. We are privileged to have students as a medium to reach out to the society. Being associated with Sister Cynthia and Sister Janet, some idea of how we can make a difference for the society has been created. To bring awareness about various issues was the main aspect of our work so far. Students were motivated to work for the welfare of children by celebrating Children's Day and Girl Child Day. We now accommodate children with disabilities in our schools to promote their rights and well-being. We keep up the International Women's Day by remembering the ordinary women who played an extraordinary role to bring change in the lives of women and society. In our schools, assemblies are held and awareness on challenges faced by women are discussed. In order to bring about a more just and humane world, we value support from others. We are also open to different ways to share our resources, to reach out to the less privileged. In some of the ways of reaching out are Uttar Pradesh Skill Development Mission, which is a government program taken up by Sister Julita CJ, which has under it 3 sectors. One electronic sector, preparing the village people who are above 18 in the field of technician and other home appliances. Second, IT sector, that is information technology. Domestic data entry is taught and the trainee gets a job at panchayat level and local levels. Third, healthcare. The course is called GDA, General Duty Assistant. Since we have a hospital, the trainees get practical experiences and later get job opportunities. Manav Aikya Samiti is a society for charity purpose attached to the hospital, which runs 12 adolescent groups in the villages under the guidance of Sister Lucy CJ, having its main focus on building strong families and helping women to become good mothers. It also has 4 tailoring centers run in the villages to cater to girls. Sustainable development goals have become a part of all our communities and schools' daily action plan. In our schools and communities, we are now able to organize many outreach programs for the care of the poor and care of Mother Earth. We do conduct assemblies in the school on sustainable development goals to raise awareness. Prayer services are conducted for the victims of war and violence. We have distributed saplings to parents of our school so that environment is cared for. Online webinars are conducted where the students and other staff members get a chance to interact with people of other states to know the challenges faced by each one. We have brought awareness on conserving water in all possible ways and keep our surrounding plastic free by making paper bags and distributing to the vendors. We continue to raise awareness in our little ways by collaborating with the staff and students with the full support of our provincial Sister LCCJ. We are happy to work with IBVM CJ UNNGO. Thank you.
We express our heartfelt gratitude for your enlightening speech, which emphasized the impactful work done at the UN, advocating for critical issues such as human trafficking, girls' education, and sustainable development goals. Your unwavering dedication and significant contributions in these areas are truly commendable. We are related to now introduce Arya Jha, a dedicated undergraduate student in public health and a youth champion with the ocean.
Greetings of the hour to everyone. I'm Arya Jha, and my journey as a passionate public health enthusiast began 3 years ago. Back then, I used to introduce myself as such. However, after joining IBVM CJ, I now proudly identify as a change maker, a fierce advocate for gender equality, and an intersectional feminist. My adventure with IBVM CJ commenced 3 years ago when I received a summons to the principal's office. As a school captain, I was initially concerned that the meeting was about some crisis like students skipping classes or other issues. To my astonishment, I was asked if I wanted to represent our school and our nation in the IBVM CJ UNNGO. Nervous and excited, I accepted the offer, not realizing that it would be a life-altering journey. My first event as a girl advocate took place on March 16, 2021, known as the CSW65 Girls Conversation Circle. This event was transformative as it marked the beginning of my personal growth. On that day, I might not have spoken much, but I absorbed valuable lessons. I learned how to express myself, raise my voice against inequalities, and effect change. Following that event, I never looked back. IBVM CJ has been my guiding light, and it's the reason for who I am today, and my unwavering commitment to work for gender equality and the well-being of women. IBVM CJ has consistently provided me with a nurturing platform. They have supported me at every step, offering numerous opportunities not only to enhance my resume, but also to foster my personal development. Through this journey, I transitioned from a girl to a woman, and for this, I will forever be grateful to the Institute. I firmly believe that the primary reason I've become a change maker is IBVM CJ. Lastly, I would like to express my gratitude to each and every individual who has acted as a bridge to help me reach where I am today. Thank you.
Thank you, Arya, for sharing your inspiring journey and insights with us today. Your transformative experiences and dedication to gender equality are truly commendable. Your words have resonated deeply, reminding us all of the power of advocacy and commitment in shaping a more equitable world. We will now move on to the Q&A. All our panelists from both the panels are welcome to answer and be part of the conversation and enlighten our audience. The first question for all the panelists today is, reflecting on your roles as representatives at the UN, what do you consider the most significant achievement or impact of your work during your tenure? The panelists who wish to answer may raise their hands. Ivan, please go ahead.
I think because my background is education, and I really believe in the importance of education and the education of youth to grow up to be change makers like the one we just heard from, and to make a real difference in the world. I think when I was there, one of the most significant things I did was visit schools. My time there predated Zoom, so everything had to be done in person. There was no opportunity to communicate in any other way except by email. So I was invited to the UK, to Ireland, to Spain, and to South Africa, where I had an opportunity to talk to secondary school students. We also visited the World Social Forum in Nairobi, where many of the Kenyan students gathered for the World Social Forum. And so those opportunities, I think, planted the seed in young people for interest in the UN. And then by taking students from Toronto schools to the UN, I know that many of them came back saying it had been a life-changing experience for them. And Genevieve Pymington, when Cecilia was there, was one of those who spent 6 months there as an intern. And so I think making the message of the UN known to young people in the schools, for me, was an important part of what I was able to do. And the other thing was Pat Murray organized in New York a meeting of all the JPIC representatives from the provinces and regions who came to New York for the DPI NGO conference. And then we stayed on for 3 days to sort of strategize about how to take the UN back to their constituents and generate interest and commitment to the work of the UN at home. So now it's so much easier when things can be done online and students don't have to go to New York to participate in UN events. I think the educational component of it is very important. And I was happy to hear today from a number of people about how the schools are getting involved and how young people are taking up that challenge.
That is really commendable work. Thank you, Ivan, for sharing that. Sister Cecilia, would you like to go ahead next?
Yes. Looking back on the years I was in New York, I think the first thing was, like, it was just at the time when technology was just giving an exponential leap, shall we say. So I was able to make the most of that and do, get a whole lot going online. For example, like if we didn't have that opportunity, it wouldn't have been possible to keep bringing people to New York or to kind of gathering people in different spaces. And it would have been very difficult to do that and do the work in New York at the same time. So the actual having online groups organized in a systematic way, I think that was very helpful. So that was one thing I'd be feel happy about, and what we tried to do on communication as well. I think we developed that. It was there, but we were able to develop it because of all the way technology was advancing. Then the kind of bringing people, getting people involved, you know, and getting the content involved through surveys and all of that on the ground, and then trying to bring that and get that information into the system, into the UN system in the different ways I mentioned. I think that for me as well was a kind of an interesting step. And I think the present group, Janice and Cynthia, are even developing it more, which is great and necessary. And then another thing I think is the actual working together in New York. And this is where what Azza was saying was so important, because we actually really worked well in interreligious, interfaith groups, you know, and we did lots of things together. Yeah, that created for me, you know, just that awareness that it is so easy to work together. Now, I know it is very easy to do it in New York. It may be more difficult on the ground, depending on the circumstances. But there was something beautiful about feeling ourselves as we're all members of this one human family, and above all, we're humans to begin with. You know, then the religion comes after that. But I think that was something I became very aware of while I was there. And I'm just so happy to see as well that different interfaith groups have been developing over these years as well, in interfaith working groups there. And that for me was important. Yeah, I think that's...
Thank you, sister, for sharing your inspiring work with us today. We're extremely grateful to all the speakers for sharing their insights today. I now invite Sister Janet to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Kashvi, and to all our moderators. We invite our participants to continue the conversation, as Azza has given us a lot of things to things to think about and to consider in our way of living. And of course, very much thank you to all our speakers. So it is my privilege to be thanking the people who made today possible on behalf of Cynthia and myself. We are grateful, of course, for our keynote speaker, Dr. Azza Karam, who I mentioned, has given us a very insightful, inspired, and thought-provoking message in the work as we continue our work for a better world, really. I also am grateful to all our panelists, IBVM's Pat Murray, Ivan Hunter, Anne Kelly, Cecilia Dwyer, and our CJ sister, Priska and Dipti. And of course, our youth advocate, Arya Jha. You have given us hope, inspiration, and plenty to think about, as I mentioned earlier. We thank our NGO office team, who are all working with us virtually. One of the things we are grateful for when technology works, and in sometimes when they don't, we still continue on. Our moderators, Kashvi and Mahi. Once again, you have done a splendid job moderating our webinar. You began your journey with us as girl advocates, and we continue to learn from each other. Our tech team, Sarah, Pratiksha, and Anna Paula, from Canada, India, and Peru, respectively. We also would like to thank previous and current institute leadership teams of the IBVM and CJ, and during our time here. Veronica, thank you for joining us today. Of course, thanks to Carmel and your team, Jane and Noel and your team, for your support and belief in the importance of our advocacy work at the UN. We wouldn't have been able to do any of this without your support. I'd also like to thank our UN province representatives, who are our partners on the ground. And of course, thank you to all of you for celebrating with us today. However, I would also like to thank Cynthia. It will be remiss of me to acknowledge Cynthia's amazing work at the UN, especially as we had to start our team together in lockdown in our separate countries, India and Australia. But she has been a great support to me, and I would really like to acknowledge that, especially because this might be the last time that Cynthia will be in this role in our webinars. I am very sure she will be coming back to work with us and help us as she goes back to India and to her, I think her major love, working for the poorest of the poor as a legal representative. Thank you so much, Cynthia. This has always been a team. You have really helped me a lot, especially in the initial days of the work we were doing here, when I had to learn a lot, and Cecilia had to tag from away from Spain. And so really appreciate your work with us, and would like everybody to please give Cynthia a big congratulations and a big, a big clap, because she has really worked hard to make this thing happen while we were in lockdown, and also when we finally got to the US and tried to scramble our work here. So thank you so much, Cynthia. I will really miss you, and very grateful for the help you've given me. So thank you, everyone. Let's continue working together for a more just, humane, and sustainable world. We look forward to welcoming you again. This is not the end of our 20 year. We look forward to welcoming you again to other webinars that we might be having, especially as we go next year for the Commission on the Status of Women and the Commission on Social Development. Thank you so much for your work. And I also would like, of course, to thank our advisory committees who are with us here. Mary Eileen, Adina, Pauline, Smita, and Hilmtrud. I think Heidi might have joined. I didn't see her, but thank you so much for the work that you have done to also to support us. And we look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you again to all of you. Bye-bye. We will see you on another Zoom, probably. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And please continue the conversations.
Hi. And thank you.
You're welcome to unmute now.
It's unmuted. I'm unmuted.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you to our, I'm sorry, thank you to our translators, Isabel and Giovanna. Apologies. I have forgotten to thank you, but you've been very, very instrumental in making sure that we have a lot of a bigger group today that we reach. Thank you so much.